I guess my initial question to you is why is this as a concept like getting traction, not just in Indiana, but it feels like across the country?
Yeah, I think people are fed up with rising property taxes, the inconsistent assessment system, and really going back to that tax on wealth, that tax on unrealized gains. This is one of the larger tax burdens that families have from property owners, from homeowner standpoint. So when they've inflated at such a rapid value due to the inflationary economy that we've been in over the last handful, 10 years, it's just expedited the problem. But really going back throughout time and history of our state, there's been efforts to revamp the property tax system over and over again. And each one of those systems has left the old system in place for the most part, right? It's been essentially Band-Aids or adjustments on the old system. There's never truly been a complete restructuring of the entire system from ground up. And so I think we're long overdue, and people are recognizing the problems with the current system.
But JD, can you get rid of property taxes? Because if you go back in the history, that's how we used to pay for the government, was land taxes. Now we call them property tax. So is it really reasonable to expect property taxes to be eliminated?
I think so, and the reason being is the economy's changed over the years. We went from a economy that used to be built on basically everybody having their own 80-acre parcel and farming and providing that income. So that was where the tax was. Now we're going to an economy that is primarily a service-based economy. So you've got to look at the changes in the economy over that time frame too. So that's a great point.
Can I ask you what the problem you're trying to solve is? And sitting here, I'll just say it sounds like you want to get around some of the exemptions that we've given, across the board.
Yeah. So the problem I'm trying to solve is going from a taxing structure where you've got a shrinking assessed valuation base, where you add the exemptions, the deductions, and moving to a more fair tax system to where everybody pays in, but at a lower amount. Even if you're not a citizen in Indiana, if you're coming in and buying services in our state, you'd be paying the sales tax on services. So you're moving from a system that ends up shrinking your assessed valuation base. Those that pay the property taxes pay a larger share of the burden year over year, to a system where everybody pays based on affordability. So moving to from a wealth-based tax to a consumption-based tax.
I remember back in 2007, 2008, when Mitch Daniels was governor, he said he looked long and hard. Mitch Daniels, one of the smartest people I've ever met, said he couldn't figure it out. So what's changed?
Well, I would say going back to that discussion, I was in high school, so I remember those discussions, but not as much detail as you do, Abdul. But I think what's changed is the amount of our revenue that's coming in statewide from services. That service-based economy is growing, and really somebody taking the time and putting with the path to eliminate property taxes and really investing the time, the effort, having the discussion, working on it for multiple years. So I think it's doable. It's not an easy task. It's, like I said, it's a monumental undertaking to repeal and replace the property tax system. I believe it's doable, but it's going to take a team and it's going to take a mission. So I think it's going to take that grassroots support and let's look back at Senate Bill 1. I mean, local units of government aren't happy. Homeowners aren't happy. Farmers aren't happy with property taxes being paid. So you've just got this perfect storm of where everybody's upset with the property tax system, looking for a solution, and coming to the realization that it is a unfixable system the way we've currently got it structured.
But is it property taxes or is it the assessments? Because one of the things that's always been, your home is based on the assessed value. Your assessed value is based on the services that you get. It's the roads, it's the schools, it's the police, it's the fire. So it's kind of a vicious circle in a way that your property taxes that you pay for, in a sense, are tied into the land, but your land's so valuable because the services that your land gets.
Yeah, it's both. It's the assessment system and the property tax system. Because if it was just the assessments, if the rest of it was okay, if you eliminated all the exemptions, deductions, everybody's paying in at a lower rate, your assessments go up. If you had caps on how much, if you keep the caps in place to how much local units of government can grow their levy, then you still need the same total amount of dollars to fund government. So if the assessments all went up consistently 10%, then you would lower your rate and you'd have the same overall tax burden. Just because your assessment goes up, it does not necessarily mean the tax bill goes up. It's when the assessment goes up and there's inconsistencies with the assessment combined with increased spending at the local level, rates not dropping. That's where the problem is. So it's multiple problems in one and it's pulling effect with the assessment going up, plus the rate system, plus the exemptions and deductions, and shrinking that overall taxing base. It's all these things combined.
And I just want to make sure I understand. So it's 7% tax on all services. We're eliminating the property tax. And then you mentioned there's a formula for how things come back to each unit of government. What's the formula?
So 10% would go into a reserve account to continue to build up healthy reserves. The rest of the funds, put those now into a bucket that's now 100%, not counting the reserves. 45% would go to schools. Those funds would follow the dollar like we do on the education funding formula. 20% would go to counties. 20% would go to cities. So these are two separate buckets, but you're looking at a formula of 75% emphasis on population, 25% emphasis on miles of roadway. And then the next category would be your township governments, your fire districts, fire territories, library boards, airport authorities. Those would be averaging the net levies, rate of inflation adjustments moving forward, and then TIF districts be the last category, which we're paying off the debt and the bond obligations for TIF districts. Once the bonds are paid for, TIF districts go away, and that money would go back into the pot to be split amongst the other units of government.
And I guess, as I understand it, TIF type, schemes would go away permanently. So something like what we're setting up right now with the Bears would not be an option moving forward. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's a stadium authority. It'd have to be restructured differently. There'd be no property tax component to that.
But to piggyback on what he just said, if you look at how sales tax is generated in Indiana, it's Indianapolis, it's Hamilton, it's Donut counties, it's Allen County, Gary, Evansville, New Albany. What about the rural counties in between? Right? Do they get screwed?
So I come from a rural community, so this has to be collected statewide and then sent back through that distribution formula. So yes, you're correct that rural counties don't have the same amount of sales tax on services per population as a more urban area. But us in the rural counties, we come to the urban areas to spend our dollars. If we're going to hire attorneys, we're going to hire contractors, we're going to the Delaware counties, the Marion counties, the Allen counties. So this is really focusing in on a statewide approach, figuring what governments need, and that funding formula, that 75% on emphasis on population, 25% emphasis on miles of roadway, that's really geared to make sure that it's fair for both a rural versus an urban community on that funding formula.
Yeah, because my question was, do the dollars stay or go back to the county where the sales tax is generated? For example, let's say I live in Danville, but I drive over to Indianapolis and I buy stuff and I go back. Does the sales tax stay in Marion County, or does it go back to Vermilion County?
No, it gets collected statewide and it goes back on that funding formula. So it's not tied to where the revenue is generated. It's tied to that funding formula. So the 75% emphasis on population, 25% emphasis on miles of roadway.
After Senate Bill 1, what did you hit your head? What the hell are you thinking, buddy?
I've been working on this before Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 1, I think, was a Band-Aid to a hemorrhaging property tax system that needs further fix. I voted in favor of it because I think it was some short-term relief, and it was a reduction in the increase of property taxes on the ag side, which I represent a very rural agriculture district. But I think there's more work to be done, and we need to come back and solve the problem versus just putting another Band-Aid on it.
You've been doing these around the state. I've done several. What have you been hearing from other folks, not necessarily here in Indianapolis? What have you been in more rural, more suburban areas? What have you been hearing from folks?
I've been hearing really good feedback from most. I think it's overwhelming positive feedback. There's been some issues that have cropped up because of doing this listening tour and bringing attention to it. So, which is great because that helps work through the issue. I'd rather know the problem now before January. So that's been very helpful to get out and hear the feedback from different areas of the state. I said it before. I come from a rural agriculture district. That's my community. So it's great for me to get out, hear from people in Indianapolis, hear from people in northern Indiana, southern Indiana, districts that don't look like mine, to see how, because this is going to be statewide policy if it were to be enacted. So I need to make sure that we're taking that under consideration, what people are thinking from around the state. So overall, it's been positive. Done a handful of these meetings with another 7 or 8 scheduled. You'd have to, we can get you a list through my press secretary as the upcoming meetings, but we've got more scheduled. I'll be in Johnson County. This Wednesday is my next one.
Did you hear anything that kind of caught you off guard or surprised you that you weren't expecting, or?
So some of the issue on bonds and working through that, and that's one of the issues that I'm working on now. But most of the questions that I'm getting at these meetings have been mostly the same. Therefore, people are thinking pretty consistently around the state. I think the big challenge is, especially those that come from a service-based industry that have traditionally been against sales tax on services, to rethink, okay, this is not just adding sales tax on services. This is sales tax on services in lieu of property taxes. So it's a difference in mindset between just being against the additional service. You're removing a tax and adding a tax. It is a shift, right? It's a change in the structure. So it's having those discussions with some of the service industries is making sure they're educated on, okay, it's not just increasing your sales tax on services, but you are removing the property tax system, and then the additional disposable income that comes from residents, constituents being able to have more of that money to spend on services because they're not paying property taxes. That's some of the discussion that's come up.
And one of the things about property tax has they've been always sort of a stable source of funding. They're good in good times and bad times. So if you switch to a sales tax on services, how do you deal with those swings in the economy that they're just sort of naturally occurring?
Yeah, great question. So this property tax system is an extremely stable tax. It's also the most costly tax to collect as well. But with the swings in the economy, that's where it's important to make sure you build a very healthy reserve, starting with at least a 6-month reserve, looking at possibly bringing that up to a year's worth of reserve to start, and a maxing out at 2 years. The initial plan maxed out at 1, so we're looking at raising that to 1 to 2 based on some of the feedback. And if you put that in perspective compared to the state's surplus that we keep for our state budget, we only have enough reserve to operate the state budget for 45 to 50 days. So this would be an extremely healthy surplus that would be able to withstand an economic downturn such as COVID when the service economy completely shut down. Thank you.
All right, good to see you.
Taking time.
Thank you.